The house that Rick had built was still a really comfy place to sleep, and by now Isabella had started to get used to it. After the sun had set on the future site of what civilians were already pre-naming New Cairo, suddenly Isabella heard a loud knock on the door in the middle of the night. Just barely with a nightgown on, Isabella walked over to a nearby closet and she pulled out a green bathrobe. She brushed her hair back to look presentable. Before Anna, Aaron, and Olsen had left, they tried to give Isabella a haircut so it was as long as her shoulders, which honestly looked really good on her. Then she rubbed her eyes to try and wake herself up and slowly walked to the entrance of her new bedroom. It was pitch black outside, and if it wasn't for young Jack, a darkly colored tomcat that almost glowed, which was a gift from Anna when she'd left earlier that night, for protection and good luck since the Egyptians believed cats were no better than royalty or even divinity itself, Isabella probably wouldn't have found her way down the stairs. She stumbled in the dark and Jack clawed at the bottom of the door. Then she opened the door and was briefly stunned to see Rick Tetch himself standing at her door. "Oh, hey." She yawned and stretched her arms. What are you doing out here?" Rick, who looked as though he'd been awake for hours but didn't seem tired at all, looked her dead in the eyes and said, "I need to show you something. I hope we could put whatever rivalry we once had behind us, once and for all. Especially because we'll be partners when the true construction begins the coming dawn." Okay," Isabella said, causing Jack to scratch the other side of the door at the bottom before they left the still nicely made house. As Isabella first began to notice, the foundations of the future Rune Capital had already begun construction at a smaller stage. There was already a series of Tetch Technologies shipping trucks filled to the near brim with large crates of materials. The blueprints had described what the construction of the mere pyramid was going to be. The only thing they probably wouldn't have needed protection from, the moon, hung in the sky as the only source of light in 1,000 miles. The sands looked like a dark blue or violet at night, which made the sight as the two trekked through the sands over a small dune to the other side. It was still mostly desert, but downhill, way off in the distance, was a big site of where Tetch Technologies as a company was situated. The papyrus skin labs were reconstructed over there too, on a large naturally uncovered groundwork conveniently made of sandstone. Ancient-looking torches were hung to the side of buildings, and civilians among the scientists walked around that area. They were the only ones who'd unfortunately not been able to receive a papyrus skin of their own due to limited supplies. And this was the only time they could go out at night. It was much more freezing to the touch, but at least it was safe. As Isabella and Rick got closer and closer to the site, she saw a familiar face among the crowd of the poor, unprotected civilians, which caught Jack's attention and dashed through the sands towards the person. He was a tall man for his age of 15, and he wore baggy clothes made out of beige materials, and even those crafted to make normal swim shirts. He had ruffled brown hair, a friendly yet unnerving gleam, and on his face he wore aquamarine-crafted glasses to accompany his dusty brown eyes. Isabella stood in shock as she thought back as to when she last saw him, before the Ecollision, and he'd mysteriously disappeared off the earth to be presumed dead. But now, here he was in her presence once again. As he gently patted Jack's back, Isabella was reminded that she'd seen Jack before he was Anna's cat, and it was associated with the long-lost name she'd forgotten about a long time ago. "Oh my God," Isabella stared, gaping at the youngish man as he smiled back in a friendly way. "Is that who I think it is? Seth?" Trying not to appear smug, but at the same time looking very proud of himself, Rick answered, "We found him hiding inside one of the shipment trucks and our little expedition to the future site had finished off. He had just barely survived the collision by hiding at the farthest bunker from the United States. He made some foreign pals, it seemed. I was contemplating on whether or not to reintroduce him into the new society. To you. After all, I vividly remember what you had told me had happened to him." Suddenly, Isabella's eyes shot wide open, and her shocked, almost excited expression turned into one more spiteful, hurt, and downright furious. She gritted her teeth and said, "Seth," before walking down the dunes to greet him one more time herself. Meanwhile, on the other end, Seth looked doomed from the start as he started to back away slowly before making a full dash into the other side of the desert around them. Unfortunately, Isabella was all but leagues faster. At the tail end of the chase, Seth tripped into a large hole where a flowing oasis would have been, pre-Ecollision. He felt cornered as Isabella dived into the dirt hole and attacked him, grasping him by the collar of his shirt and shining a fiery spark of red rage Seth hadn't seen in her for a very long time. "You twisted brat, Seth!" Isabella shrieked, looking her long-lost brother dead in the eyes. "Where the hell have you been all these years? And why did you run off like that in the middle of the night? We thought you were dead! What do you have to say for yourself, you little two-times troublemaker?" "Now, calm down, Issa," Seth stuttered in fear, staring into her fiery eyes. "I just got here. Save revenge for later." Isabella grunted as she heaved Seth over her head, still grabbing onto his shirt as she slammed him into the ground. When she backed off, Seth's back was in absolute agony as he struggled to stand upright. When he did, his spine felt half fractured, so he sort of hunched over for a minute. Horrified at his own sister, but not exactly feeling remorse, or even disrespect for it. Even still, he continued to stutter, as it was now a condition built up from literal years of being out on his own. If Rick had tried to abruptly intervene, he would have explained it to Isabella, but decided to back off as he just let things play out. Groaning in pain as he struggled to snap his back upright, Seth stared at Isabella and said to her in a frightened tone, "What do you want from me?" "What do I want?" Isabella roared in fury. "I want to know how the hell you survived and why the hell you abandoned me like that. I remember vividly what had happened on that night, you sniveling little coward. I remember how you brought Anna and Olsen to that governmental site to prove your stupid little theory. I remember how when the alarm sounded, you jumped out the frickin' window and never came back because of just how scared you were to confront Mom and Dad about all the billions of laws you broke just by entering on that site. You told me to tell them you went to frickin' Australia, but that you would come back within a year. I remember how when a year passed, you didn't even write. And I'd remember how you were all but legally presumed dead, wasting away out in the desert just because you couldn't handle living out on your own on a global expedition. And most of all, I remember how cocky and confident you were as a person before you disappeared into the unknown. How you would have thrown us under the bus if it meant you could be proven right and would become rich and famous. How on multiple occasions you endangered your life just to get a sight of the stupid phenomena you were looking out for in the desert in the dead of night. So how about it, brother? Did you find all that you were looking for, stranded out there on your own? Did you find the elusive Ugiva-Fuka tribe you blabbered on and on about? Tell me, did you? Or did you just find the truth after years and years of denying it? Looking beaten and guilty all at the same time, Seth couldn't do much else but say, "Look, Issa, I figured back then that it would have been better if I just left all of the pain I was causing you. No one would have even noticed. And it's not like you even did before. I'm sorry for all that I had done to you. Will you ever forgive me?" Grimacing at her sniveling sibling, Isabella bit her tongue as she answered back in a calm but firm voice. "As long as you change your ways for good, Seth. No more trying to prove yourself only to end up proving yourself dead. Do some honest work, do as you're told, and maybe I'll respect you again. This world is over. The only place you would find any of that nonsense you were obsessed with is where you might end up if you're not careful. Got it? Do I make myself clear?" wiping away his tears with the back of his hand as he struggled to stand up again. He tried to stand upright as he nodded and answered back with a very sorrowful tone. "You have my word, sister." Isabella then turned and walked back to Rick before Seth knelt down, held Jack, and said, "Can I have the cat back, please?" Isabella stopped and turned to look at Seth. She nodded once. Seth sighed in relief as Jack jumped out of his hands onto the ground, and the two walked back to the site of the Rune Capital, walking closely behind as Seth smiled gratefully for the first time in a while.